Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's wonderful to see so many of you here. My name is Kate Moss. I'm a novelist and, as most of you know, the biographer, as it were, of the first 50 years of our beloved CFT. And it's an incredible pleasure to be doing this pre-performance talk tonight with Olivier Award-winning Timothy Sheader, who is the director, and Liam Steele, who is the co-director and choreographer of Barnum. It is a co-production with the legendary Cameron Mackintosh, who was described by the New York Times as the most successful, influential and powerful theatrical producer in the world, which is probably true, I imagine. Now, of course, Barnum is one of those sort of magical pieces of music theatre. It opened here with Michael Crawford in 1981, having opened in Broadway with Jim Dale and Glenn Close the year before. This production, the co-production, has been some years, I think maybe 7 years in the making, talking between Cameron Mackintosh and CFT. And so I'm going to start, I suppose, Tim, with you as the director. When did you get involved in this production?
I think it was about 2 years ago, wasn't it?
That's a good start.
Yeah, I can't
ladies and gentlemen, I can.
We lost track of time already. It's like feels like a lifetime, but it's like
it certainly wasn't 7 years ago.
No,
it was like about 2 years ago. Yeah.
And was it one of those pieces of music theatre that you had thought one day I'd really like to get my hands on it, or did it come out of the blue a bit?
I didn't know it.
You didn't know it. Had you ever seen it?
No, never seen it. It's slightly before my time of seeing shows. Just before, so it wasn't kind of.
It's because he's very young, ladies and gentlemen, and very talented.
It's only been done once, hasn't it? And then one tour, I think.
Yeah.
So, had you seen it?
I saw it on TV one Christmas. But it did. I was really affected by it at the time. It had a big effect on me. It was the Michael Crawford version, yeah, that I saw on TV. I think they broadcast it on a Boxing Day or something.
Yes.
The BBC used to do these sort of theatre things, which I always used to make the whole family sit and watch.
Yes, exactly.
And
that and the two Ronnies.
I've now seen it 1,000 times because Liam and I have got the DVD of it, so we go back and go, how did they do this bit? Or what did they do? Why can't we get this bit right?
Do you think actually that was a really good thing? Because you didn't have that sort of nagging, that version and now it's my version, that you could come to it clean, as it were?
Possibly, yeah. I don't get affected by those things. The only thing that in musical theatre that I will never direct personally is Carousel, because I can't erase Nicholas Heitner's production from my head at the National. But so I guess that's a good thing. Yeah, I didn't have any visual memory of it.
And it's one of those questions, you know, there's a lot of music theatre at Chichester. It's been very, very successful powerhouse for music theatre. Do you, when you're approached and you were asked to do it, do you then immediately think, right, I must get a creative team together? Or do you immediately think, I must get, particularly in something like Barnum, that character together? Where do you start putting a production together of this type?
That's a good question, because I guess a lot of people would answer with the actor. But no, for me it was definitely creative team who's going to be surrounding you and who's making the work with you and who are going to be your best friends making this work together. And then very quickly onto the actor, yeah.
And Christopher Fitzgerald, he's got a huge pedigree, Broadway. Here he's a new actor to Chichester. He's never played at Chichester before. So how early did he come on, and did you build your production around him and what he could do?
He came quite late. Right. And I don't think it's kind of giving any secrets away.
Yeah.
That it was sent to various British stars, because it is a star vehicle, isn't it? Who didn't want to do it, or didn't fit into their schedules, or they weren't right in the end when a few people came in to sing and to read, and then he was late because it was about Christmas, about November. We were in rehearsals at the National, because I remember him coming there to audition. Liam and I directed a show in New York last year, and he auditioned for that and didn't get it because he was too young for the role. But I remembered him, and so I mentioned him to Cameron, and Cameron rang Stephen Sondheim, because he'd just worked for Chris had just done Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum that Sondheim had seen, and Sondheim approved, and so then Jonathan met him in New York, and then they flew him over.
Yeah, God. So I mean, that must have been quite nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
You know, the big thing in the big real tent that was going up, and you were casting then.
Yeah, and all it does hinge, those that have seen the show, or it does hinge on that character. So it was nerve-wracking until he was in place.
And there was a stage where it was like, is it? We had to have a deadline whereby if he's not in place, if we haven't got a Barnum by this point, then the project won't happen.
Because I didn't know until I was preparing to come and have a terribly intimate chat with you in front of hundreds of people. I didn't realise that P.T. Barnum was a real character. And I thought that was actually rather wonderful, to realise that this was a real person who was being sort of voiced in this sort of way. So you get him, but you must have been working on the production. And it says that it's a new version. So how much flexibility do you have in terms of this new CFT Cameron Mackintosh version as opposed to the original Broadway, the Cy Crawford, and then coming over here? Where do you start to fiddle?
Liam and I are very interested in fiddling with musicals.
It's a technical term, ladies and gentlemen.
Because
we're impressed.
I'm not really interested in just kind of putting on a carbon copy of what's gone before. We don't do that with Shakespeare. Why should we do it with musical theatre? And traditionally, we have done that with musical theatre. It has always been a revival of Hello Dolly, just like Carol Channing did it. Not knowing it was a good thing. And then the writer has been available and around, who's in Chichester at the moment. Cameron had very strong ideas, and he had reworked part of it before we came on board, and then we worked with him and with the writer and then with the actors in the rehearsal room. Lines are still being, today 2 lines are being cut and another one's going in, a new line today. So it is slightly being rewritten, but the second act is significantly different to the first time round. There's a whole song that I think in the programme is called Barnum's Lament towards the end of the show, which was not in 1981 production at all, when he's on stage on his own at the end after.
Yeah, it's very beautiful.
Yeah,
I thought
that's brand new. That
never existed. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's not. Is it a question of modernising it or making it more appropriate for an audience that is very music theatre literate? What is it when the new version? What changes?
Yes, your job is always about how to make something. It's not necessarily about changing the language, but how do you make it relevant and resonant, and how does it speak to an audience today in Chichester? Who is the audience? Where is the audience? And when is it? When are we going to be telling that story? So that affects the visuals, obviously, and everything isn't just the text. And also, it was about examining it. I'll use that brilliant example of Nick Hytner's Carousel. When Carousel was first staged in 1948, I think, it was nothing like Nick Hytner's production because we didn't act in musicals in that way in 1948. We just developed the musical. We just arrived at a book musical where scene naturally flowed into song. Before it was much more musical comedy. And so when we revisit these musicals now, taste has changed. And so revisiting Barnum, it was kind of looking for perhaps more of a dramatic through line than might have existed in 1981.
I think at the time, like when Crawford did it and Jim Dale, it was very much a star vehicle for that one actor.
Yes.
And so approaching this, Cameron was very keen, and so were we, to look at it in terms of the relationship between Barnum and Cherry, and that become the focus of the piece. And then Tim and I, when we approached it, was very much looking at the ensemble's role within that. What did they fulfil in terms of telling this story as well? So it wasn't just this one star vehicle, it was using an actor to tell the story.
And you mentioned the ensemble. The thing that struck me is it's a wonderfully strong, equal ensemble. So you don't have, as you think of the old days, we were talking before about English views of circus, and Billy Smart, I think, was for most of us. It wasn't Madison Square Garden and Barnum and Bailey in quite the glamorous way it sounded. But of course, we have all those things of women with tassels and leotards on and all of. And what I thought was wonderful about your production is that it felt like proper circus, proper dancers, proper strong women and men together as an ensemble, rather than the dada that we often think of in circus. Yeah. I mean, was that quite deliberate to get those sorts of performers, very muscular and strong performers?
It was. They went through the most rigorous audition. We had, I think, all those performers on stage had 7 auditions.
Oh, crikey.
So they did. They came. They
Some
did
of which were, a whole day.
Yeah, they came and did a movement call. First of all. Then they had to sing, and then they went to did a circus. And they did another movement call with Andrew Wright, the choreographer on the show. Then they did a second circus call. Then they came back for finals, and then it just went on and on and on. And it wasn't about putting them through it. It was basically we knew the number of skills that they needed in the show. And in terms of the circus stuff, they didn't need to be circus trained at all.
Right.
There's only 5 people in the show that have any circus background at all. But they needed to have the core strength, so we needed to test them as to whether they could pick that up within the time that we had, which was a very, very short rehearsal period.
And did you, when you were auditioning all of those people, where's the balance between strong singing and strong dancing? What do you prioritise?
Well, you fight for your own department.
Right.
That's what happens.
Yeah.
And there are compromises within it. So if someone's an incredibly strong dancer or a circus performer and their voice is a bit weaker, we go, okay, then this person who's got an incredibly strong voice but is not as strong physically to be able to do any of the circus stuff, then that becomes the balance out. So you've got that capacity on stage to have that vocal quality, but also that you can create the images that you need to create. And it's also in every musical we have to people cover roles as well. So you're constantly thinking about that. Well, can that person play that role if that person suddenly
it's a jigsaw, so you end up with quite a lot of people that you'd like in the show, but ultimately they don't all get in because X needs to balance Y, or
Right.
you offer X and X turns it down, which means Y isn't appropriate because Y isn't tall enough to partner the new person. It goes on and on.
It's
It really does.
Says the tired man who hasn't opened yet.
Yeah, the end of it is horrible when you are literally, we have all these photographs out on a table and it is like, okay, is this our company? And it's like, and the people, like Tim says, that you really want in the show, but suddenly they don't fit in the whole company, in the whole ensemble, so they get pushed to the side.
So is that moment then, but for all of that, there's this huge build-up. When everybody meets for the first time, did you show them a maquette or a sketch of what the magnificent tent was going to look like? I mean, how do you get them as excited as you guys clearly were?
Yeah, that's what we do. Although we didn't at first. We waited a week because they were learning circus skills and started to do choreography, and then I think we kind of waited a week, and then we did the presentation of the model, and Dan came and talked about the tent and what was happening in Chichester. And we got regular updates every week at production meetings. We were told at what stage the tent was at, and I have to be honest, I didn't expect us to be where I didn't expect what happened to happen. I thought we'd get here and we'd be told to go back to London and rehearse a bit more because it wouldn't be ready. And we got here.
It was amazing.
But you've met Alan Finch. That was never going to happen.
True.
But it wasn't even the tent. It's just the amount of infrastructure backstage, and in terms of showers being operational and dressing rooms all being. They literally went into the dressing room and everyone had a dressing gown and a pair of slippers. I'm like, my God.
There's been, I'm afraid, a lot of Chichester talk, obviously, about all the loos are better than the real theatre. I mean, yes, I'm afraid they've been very impressive. But were you able to have any input into what you might need? Because obviously there's no flying in CFT, the festival theatre normally. But of course, I'm not going to spoil it, but there is here. So were you able to say, look, is there any chance that we'd be able to have X number of people falling from the sky, or this sort of, how much could you have your imagination being played out because of what the structure was going to be and how it was developing?
It was a huge logistical conversation all the way through, because in terms of the tent itself has a maximum weight load, and then we've built a floating rig within the space that all our equipment hangs off as well. But there's only a certain amount that the tent will take. So everything, it is literally worked out to the nth degree, whereby, okay, we've got 3 crew members in that time, so we're going to have so many performers. Okay, if we add a performer now, then a crew member has to leave the rig.
But we did have some input, didn't we?
Yeah, all the way through. So there was a constant conversation. And in terms of, lighting and sound, every department had to be involved in terms of making sure we could achieve what we could achieve, but every department having at least what they needed.
Yes, because I mean, the thing that I felt when I was watching it, as you can see, everybody, I just thought it was brilliant. I mean, just so joyous and wonderful. But I did keep thinking, my God, there's all of that incredible lighting design, there's incredible choreography. I mean, I thought amazing set. And every time something new happened, I thought, oh my God, that's brilliant. And I did think of it exactly about that. Was it like every department going, we need this now, we need a bit more time, we need a bit more support, or, you know, is that what it's like when you put something that complicated?
Yes, it is, and even to today, you know, we've worked all up, I don't know what time we started work today, 12:30 we started, and so we've been rehearsing since 12:30 today, and we go through the schedule at 10 o'clock or whatever time the show stops, ends, and we're still fighting. Sound will say, I need to do this. Lights will say, well, we can't do a show again unless I get to rehearse this. And you know, then we argue about what's priority, and it, you know, it takes a good 40 minutes to figure out the next. Yeah. Some people don't use previews, and the previews are controversial, aren't they? What is a preview? But we always use previews, and the show, I can't begin to tell you the journey this particular show has gone on. Last week felt like about 6 months to everybody who's working on this show. But the journey it went on from the previous Saturday to when you saw it, Kate, on Saturday, is extraordinary, how that show changed. I mean, we laugh a little bit that in the programme there's a lot of rehearsal photos. None of that's in the show. It's all gone.
You say, well, it's sleight of hand, isn't it? It's the circus makes it seem different. But I mean, that presumably is about you as the director, you as the choreographer and co-director, and everybody else in your team. Firstly, holding your nerve, but also trusting the preview audiences, that they will bring something to it as well. Is that really what it's about?
It's essential, absolutely essential, because you even at a run through in the rehearsal room when the Whigs lady comes and whoever, Jonathan comes, you start to hear the play and watch the play through their ears. Even though I know I could stand and recite the entire play to you, suddenly you hear it differently. So you put 1,600 or whatever it is it 1,600? No, 14.
14, I think.
1,400 people in there, and we've had full houses. You learn masses. You learn where the show just dips, or where it needs to slow down, or where you need to give another effect because we're bored.
Yeah.
And we know it's not. You find this show didn't find its rhythm till Friday night.
And it's also for Chris as well. It's like playing Barnum in terms of he needed an audience. That character is so much about his relationship with that audience, and so for him to be able to run the show a number of times and find out where that relationship sits and where exactly the same thing, where it's dipping and what he needs to do and where are they listening to me, and playing that space. It's a new space in terms of
he's found that we only ran it once in the rehearsal room, and he's found the thrust difficult because we talked to him constantly about it in rehearsals, but he just said, but I just played to your table for 6 weeks. And for the first few and then about 4 shows in, he said, wow, there's all these people at the sides, I must talk to them. And then he came off and he said, God, you get much bigger applause when you talk to the people over there.
Yeah, they like it when you talk to them as well. But one of the things that you've clearly done that so well, because when we saw it on Saturday afternoon, many of the front of house staff said, I said, God, they said, are you enjoying it? I could see they were asking everybody. And I said, I think it's absolutely fantastic, having an amazing time. And they said, it's incredible how much it's changed. And so there is this sort of sense of they're all ambassadors for the show as it's developed, which is great, actually.
And they sat through the previous Saturday, which was painful.
Oh, good, excellent. I missed the pain, I'm glad to say things. But, you talked about casting Chris and that coming quite late in and the importance of the ensemble, and I really think the choreography is so fantastic with the ensemble. It really is just so imaginative apart from anything else. But of course it's very, very important Tamsin Carroll as Mrs. as I thought he was pronouncing chérie badly, but all the way through. But that central relationship, since you said you've made it about a narrative, that presumably was absolutely essential, that casting of Mr. and Mrs.
And that was equally as hard.
Yes,
we saw all the every leading lady you can think of kind of came in for that. And after we'd cast Chris, and actually Tamsin came in very early on, and we just kept looking for other people, and then we kind of went back to Tamsin and said, let's get Tamsin back. And
because you've worked with her in other
she's only been here a year. She came and worked for Cameron McIntosh a while back. She played Nancy in Oliver. She's from Australia, and then she went home and she married somebody from Oliver, so she came back a year ago when she got married, and she came to work. She played Titania at Regent's Park last year and was in a musical called Ragtime that I directed. And then Liam and I did a show at the National Theatre in December, and she was in that. So this is the third show in a year.
Which is, I mean, that must make a difference, presumably. If things are complicated and difficult, if you're working with actors that you know, does that make a difference, or are they different in every role?
And Tamsin is a very different creature to Chris, and they work together brilliantly. And how should I say this? The dynamic the offstage dynamic works partly because of the way Tamsin works.
Yeah. And it's quite similar to their onstage dynamic.
Yes, it is.
Is it really?
That's exactly that.
That's why it works. Chris, Chris, you needed that Barnum's character to have that energy of a child. You know, he's his ideas and stuff, and Chris has that natural energy, and Tamsin is like a consummate professional.
Yeah, so it is actually the flim-flam sort of...
It is,
yes,
and also Tamsin is one of those actors that knows about the whole show, so it isn't all about her. She understands that a scene might have to be played in a particular... For example, there's a scene at the end of Act 1 when there's the moment of infidelity, and it is a moment of infidelity.
Yes.
In rehearsal and in the first 4 or 5 performances, we were really playing that for all its worth. And the net result of that was we didn't care for Barnum anymore.
Well, yes,
you
absolutely.
can't do that. The evening is called Bart. So Tamsin understands that and has completely changed the way she plays that scene, because we can't go to Act 1 disliking to the interval disliking Barnum. We can question his motives and his behaviour, but we mustn't not like him, which is what was happening.
but actually, what I felt about that, you'd done it in so cleverly, because I was, was that firstly, there's that element, you've been a bit of a silly boy here, rather than a philandering whatever.
Mm-hmm. Which is what...
And secondly, that it's also chaste, that his relationship with Jenny Lind, it doesn't seem difficult to carry on liking him, because there's nothing sexy about it.
But you see, that's a development as well, because earlier in the week there was a big passionate kiss on the staircase, and that came out.
Yeah, ladies, you should suck your teeth at that point. I'm so sorry that you have our backs.
I'm trying to play
we're
the
going to get huge applause from this side, but I won't. So we do. So those are the things that the audience. That's why the audience matters so much.
So you would respond to the fact that the audience are not with Barnum at that moment.
Now, I mean, obviously, musical theatre got some cracking songs. Did you feel that there were some key songs? I mean, whether there's a sucker born every minute, or, my favourite is Brick by... I love... I never get the title. Like, One Brick at a Time. I always think it's called Brick by Brick, because I think I have Dorothy in my head in Yellow Brick Roads. But did you feel that actually there was one key song that would define the musical side of your version of Barnum? Or actually, do you think it's more equal throughout the show?
If Cameron were here, he would definitely say it's Come Follow the Band. That's his favourite, and not favourite isn't quite the right word. That's what he believes is the essence of P.T. Barnum, and the flights of fancy, his imagination, the journey he invites you to go on in life.
And what would you say?
I think we approach the numbers we know there are certain numbers within the show that are very musical theatre front cloth numbers, like the Joyce Heth number, Bigger Isn't Better, the Tom Thumb number, and so it's approaching those, and then there were other numbers in the show that were about storytelling. To some extent, One Brick at a Time is that. Yeah. Museum's a patter song, so it was, and again, songs like the Museum song originally was a completely different set of choreography, and we realised, Tim saw it and just went, it's too big, it's too busy, we can't, it's a patter song for Barnum, we have to stand still and deliver that song. So the whole lot gets thrown out, because you realise the dynamics of the show and what we need to be listening to at that point. So to be honest, it's about approaching each number individually and what is there, what do we require them to do in the show at that point, I think.
And do you modify depending on what the individual actors' skills are? Because I won't spoil it, but you will all know here who've come to any of these talks that I really like tap dancing. And so I was very pleased that there was some tap dancing. But is that the sort of thing that comes in because you knew that he
No.
had that, or had you already decided it needed to
We
be there?
decided that was going to be tap.
Yeah,
so
and we had a discussion when Andrew White came on board as well as the other choreographer on the show. That Andrew's an amazing tapper and is amazing. I don't know the first thing about tap, so I was very happy start there. And so we had that discussion and we decided to make it a tap number. And again, sometimes it's in terms of the original and not copying the original, knowing but just going, okay, well, how do we put our own stamp on this and that character and make that character youthful and give him his own voice in that moment. So it just and then we auditioned people to be able to tap for that role.
Yeah.
Right. So you'd already made that decision. It
Yeah.
wasn't someone, like that awful moment in audition, someone turns up and goes, well, actually, I can play the violin too. And what surprised you when you were doing it? Were there sudden parts of Barnum that you realised you loved much more and had overlooked, or that there were things you suddenly realised you didn't enjoy as much? I mean, is it, one of those shows, did you discover things about your original feelings about Barnum as you were doing it that changed how you saw it?
I think we worked on tone a lot. That's and still we're nearly finished on tone now, but it has taken a long time. We did rehearse it with quite a lot of gravitas, and those because of what you were saying about making it a show about Mr. and Mrs. Barnum, we rehearsed those scenes quite naturalistically, and it suddenly became a little bit like we were doing Ibsen, and which is a good process and is good to have those foundations, but we've certainly been stripping that back, finding the style of the show and understanding that this is proper old-fashioned musical comedy, and you have to deliver that.
But there has also got to be, in inverted commas, proper acting.
Yeah.
Because now there's so much music theatre of very high quality now. I mean, obviously, most of it started off by Cameron Mackintosh in the first place. But, I mean, there's a lot of music theatre, and people know music theatre and they do. And
we expect more now. That's going back to what originally in the early 80s, we didn't expect that much from. If you could sing and dance, and stand at the front and maybe say the lines, that was kind of good enough. But we demand our acting has become as important in musical theatre as the singing and dancing.
Do you like first nights? Are you the type that go and sit in the bar? Are you there in the box? Are you excited? Oh dear.
He hates them.
You hate them, do you? You're looking grumpy already. I've made you grumpy. I'm really sorry about that.
So it's actually, because when we work together, I probably would hate them, but I become the therapist on those nights. So my job is just to sort of, go wherever he goes. He goes, okay, it's fine. And let's go and drink wine. There was a famous, when we did a show at Regent's Park together, and people bring picnics to Regent's Park. And Tim was, I'm not going in, we're not watching it. So we, people don't tell me, I hope nobody was there that night. We literally just went round and ate people's picnics for the whole show. So that was the show. So we just had a nice time eating leftover food left on tables. So bring nice food if you're coming on Wednesday night.
But put a padlock on it by the sounds of things. Yes, and the other horrible question, I say this as a novelist at this point, because it's that thing, do you read the reviews? Do you feel, as the director, it's your job to read the reviews for the actors?
I do think it's your job, particularly as an artistic director. I think you have a responsibility to take care of those people who. I'd rather not, but I think it's part of the job to do.
And are you the sort that can forget anything?
I seriously now don't. I've stopped getting concerned and anxious about them because I don't always believe the good ones.
No.
So I sometimes read good ones and think, really, I don't think it's that good. And so so you then can't believe some and not the others. So I'm interested in people's opinion, in their opinions, but I personally think I'm the best judge of my work, and so
actually you have that rare, I think, often quality of being able to enjoy the process and the value of the work rather than the rewards of the work.
Yeah. And I'm not saying, when I say I'm the best judge, I genuinely think some people like, and I think, no, it's not good enough. Or other times, actually, I'm really proud of that piece of work. And I think that's really important to hold on to.
Yes, and you can end up actually insulting people If they say, I think your show is brilliant, and you go, no, it isn't. That's kind of rude, isn't it? Suggests they've got no judgment at all, that sort of thing. But so, do you take any notice of those sorts of things?
I try and avoid them.
Yeah.
I'm the opposite to Tim, just because actually don't like giving them legitimacy, because it is one person's opinion. And I know they're important in terms of letting people know about the show, and in terms of they're great in terms of promoting a show if it's a good show, but ultimately it's these people that you have to listen to, not one sort of person that sits in his room and writes it and thinks they know more about theatre than you do, which is often the case, and they don't.
They're diminishing. I don't know if in your business, Kate, whether it's the same, but they're diminishing in importance, really, because we're all writing, because everything's
absolutely.
tweeted and blogged and.
In fiction now, it makes no difference to sales, oddly. And although in New York at the same time, it still does. There's a couple of New York Times people that can kill a book. But here, not anymore. No, absolutely.
Same in theatre, in New York, definitely. They still have a lot of clout over
But it's different as a writer, because whatever I feel, the work is done. It's out there. I can't have some yapping voice in my ear that will change the work. Whereas what I always feel about actors is they have to go on again and again, and so keeping that other voice must be quite a hard thing. So I'm going to allow the audience to ask a couple of questions, if you're all right with that, because we have got a couple of minutes, and I know that this is an audience who likes to ask questions. While you're thinking, thank you for the lights, thank you very much. The last question for you, Tim, from me. You are the artistic director of Regent's Park Open Air Theatre, wonderful environment, such a beautiful theatre to go to. You are doing Barnum, a musical and a story about circus and, what is performance, what is a museum, what is circus. And there is a brand new theatre built in the park. So you've come from one park to the other. When you saw it for the first time, did it look like the place that you wanted to be doing Barnum in?
Yes, totally. Yeah, very much. It's very exciting to be part of this adventure here. And as I was saying to you outside, there's a real civic pride about it. There seems to be a real sense of, the odd taxi I've taken, or talking to people in the street, or coming up to look at it, and that's really wonderful to be part of that. Obviously I'm weather obsessed because of my job in London. But we were talking when we were just eating before we came in here about the thunder and lightning's about to come, isn't it, and the rain, and what it's going to sound like on the tent.
Yeah. Well, people will think it's an amazing sound effect, probably, won't they?
There's a drum roll through the whole show.
It won't be such a terrible one as, Jonathan Church directed Grapes of Wrath, or Grapes of Wrath, as we're supposed to call it, obviously. And it was the bit when they were like, we're all dying, there's no water, and all we could hear was the rain on the roof, wasn't
really?
It was flooding.
It's noisy here, isn't it?
Oh my lord! Yeah. It was that moment of suspension of disbelief. It was quite a challenge there. Right, there are time for a couple of questions.
Very briefly.
Yeah.
The process for you to become a director, is it that you express an interest in doing Barnum, or does Cameron Mackintosh approach you?
Oh, you don't express an interest to Cameron Mackintosh. You wait for that call. In this instance, yeah, definitely he comes to you. But in many other instances, you write letters, or you might I might ring Jonathan up and say, oh, I'd really like to direct X in the Minerva. Are you interested? But Jonathan and I are equals. We're artistic directors, and or you might write to Nicholas Heitner, or you might be rung up by Nicholas Heitner. It works both ways, but with Cameron, you wait to be asked.
Elegantly put. Lady in the front there.
Yes, well, just you're talking about sound effects. I'm very interested in how you have done the acoustics in a setup like that tent. How does it work for the actors and for the sound?
I think we all anticipated many more problems than we've had, because I'd certainly been to the similar theatre in the park in Kensington Gardens. I saw Peter Pan a couple of years ago, where the acoustic was not good, and I found it very difficult to follow. We haven't really had that many problems.
I think we've got a very good sound designer on the show, Mick Potter and stuff, and it's also again what Kate was saying in terms of the planning process, because the theatre was being built for this purpose, for the shows this season, that sound, and people could have that input into the process quite early on. So the whole thing was thought through as the theatre itself.
It's always the
was being
thing
designed.
that arrives last as well, the sound, because they can't do anything in the rehearsal room. And actually, you don't have the band in the technical rehearsals. So we're on stage for a week, putting the show, when we see the costumes and the lights, and you can't have the band are never traditionally, it's too expensive. The band are not there. So they can't even work then. Sound's job doesn't really start until you arrive, when the band, the band don't get
So
here.
you didn't have to put in particular structures for the acoustics?
I can't really
Well,
answer that question.
I think it was a massive part of the architectural design and all of these things long before the show was, to my understanding. And there's sort of liners within liners within liners. And I think certain decisions, I think I heard Alan Finch talking about, such as having handbells. No, that sounds like it's the sound of music. I didn't mean that, but people ringing a bell going round to go back into the theatre for the, after the interval, rather than some sort of electronic noise and little things, trial and error sort of things. I think
They've certainly done a very good job.
There was
with the
also,
sound.
in terms of sound, the big thing about the tent as well was just in terms of sound coming out, in terms of neighbours and residents and stuff. So there was a lot of fear and issues around like the noise level, that actually it had to be kept within a certain limit. So there was lots of tests to make sure that the show itself wouldn't be too noisy for people living across the road.
But for those of you who went to the wonderful sort of pop-up theatre on the fly, it ain't that. Because there was this terrible moment in a very brilliant piece called Playhouse Creatures, fantastic, about the first women on stage, really grim and difficult at the end, and that all could be heard was the sound of champagne corks in the bar. It was like, I had to try and overlook that. Is there one last question? Anybody want to shout or fling their arm up? Yep.
Having seen it's an amazing production. It's a huge tent. It must have cost an absolute fortune to put this on. You're not here, relatively speaking, for that long. Where does all this lot go next?
I don't. In terms of the tent, well, there's Neville's Island next, isn't
Yes,
there?
Neville's Island comes in.
I suspect there will be a future for the tent itself, because it's.
Does this tent and Barnum then go off somewhere else?
Together? No. No, I mean it was. I mean, I really shouldn't be answering this question, but Alan isn't here, to my knowledge, and neither is Jonathan. But I think the idea was absolutely, after all the wonderful years of support that all of you have given, and the way that Alan and Jonathan have built CFT up to being this extraordinary powerhouse, was not letting you all not have a couple of big shows in the summer. So I think it's specifically built for this season only, and of course by next year there will the Festival Theatre will be open for a shorter season, but it will be open again. So I think that's the idea. Right, well, on that note, because we are bang on the money, as you know, there's always a post-show discussion afterwards, that it's called, and this for Barnum will be the 12th of August, and that happens after the show in the theatre on the park, so it won't be down here. You don't have to have gone to see the show that night, but obviously you do still have to get a ticket, so that if you want to get in and see that, and that will be members of the cast, creative team, whoever fancies it. The next pre-performance talk that I'm doing will be here in the Minerva at 6 o'clock on the Monday the 19th of August, and I'll be interviewing Jonathan Church for his revival of The Resistible Rise of Arturo Ui that was so successful and wonderful here last year before it goes into London. I was going to make a terrible gag now about I should let give the theatre back to the actors and let you all free to go and follow the band. But it's a bit lame, and you haven't actually seen it yet. So all I will say is, those of you who have not yet seen it, you have the most incredible night in store, whether it's tonight or later. And I just want to say to the award-winning, wonderful Timothy Sheader and Liam Steele, director, co-director and choreography, you have done that tent proud. Thank you so much, and it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.